Hey everyone, hope you're having a wonderful evening. I wanted to make a video to talk about something that I didn't cover as a main video. I'm not sure if I'm going to start doing these more off-the-cuff videos on this channel or on my second channel, Mike Figueredo. I'm not sure if you guys are interested in these videos where I just kind of shoot from the hip and I'm not necessarily as prepared. I just kind of talk about what's on my mind. Let me know if you want to see that. But regardless, I had to react to the controversy surrounding David Hogg and the DNC, because this is very entertaining to me, to put it mildly. I kind of feel like I don't take anything that's happening personal because I'm so far removed that I just don't feel like I have a horse in this race. I lost faith in the DNC a very, very, very long time ago, so them doing something that is a little unethical, not the most surprising thing to me, to put it mildly. But this story is fascinating for a number of reasons. And I think that if you don't dive beneath the surface, you might get a skewed perception of what's actually happening. So what's happening is, we all know David Hogg has announced the plan to challenge incumbent Democrats, which led to a lot of backlash from DNC elites who don't want him to do that. The DNC chair himself wants to try to make him be neutral. David Hogg would not sign a neutrality pledge. Ken Martin is now trying to force this on him. And then we see all of this controversy, this back and forth between David Hogg and James Carville. Then they make up, but other elites are attacking David Hogg. Bakari Sellers comes out and criticizes him after his appearance on Bill Maher. There's a lot going on. And then all of a sudden today we see that the DNC voted to move towards his ouster. Whoa, what a surprise. But let me give you the details, because of course they're not voting to oust him because they're against his plan here. This is him potentially being ousted along with another vice chair, to be fair, because of something entirely different. I'm sure this has, nothing to do with him trying to primary incumbent Democrats, wink, wink. But there is an actual reason why they're trying to do this. So let me read you the article from NBC News. A Democratic National Committee subcommittee on Monday recommended that the organization invalidate one of its February vice chair votes over claims that it unfairly disadvantaged female candidates. The move, which won't be official unless the entire DNC votes to approve it, could open up new races for the positions held by David Hogg, a Florida activist, and Malcolm Kenyatta, a Pennsylvania state legislator. The challenge by Oklahoma Democratic Committee woman Kaylin Free, who unsuccessfully ran against Hogg and Kenyatta in the February race for DNC vice chair, is not related to the ongoing tension between Hogg and the National Party over his push to support primary challenges against incumbent Democrats. Instead, it was based off Free's claim that the handling of the vice chair vote gave the two men an unfair advantage amid the National Party's requirements that its executive committee achieve gender balance. Nevertheless, the Monday evening vote by the DNC Credentials Committee sets up a high-profile decision for the National Party in the coming weeks, as it will now be up to the full body to vote on whether or not to call for a new election for the vice chair positions held by Hogg and Kenyatta. So as you can see, he's not potentially going to be ousted because of this challenge to incumbent Democrats. It's because of the way that the last election was run and it violated the DNC's gender balance. They're very vague on the details here, but I mean, in actuality, if this is subjected to a vote and they have to redo the election, then the people who were angry with David Hogg for trying to primary incumbent Democrats actually do get to vote against him. So even though the catalyst for this potential revote might not necessarily be his plan to primary Democrats, the people who are pissed off at him, that might weigh into their decision. In fact, I argue it definitely would. And, if the DNC doesn't want to make it seem like they're putting the thumb on the scale again, not the best timing to do this. Nonetheless, David Hogg is acknowledging that, the context here is important. In a statement, he says, "Today, the DNC took its first steps to remove me from my position as vice chair at large. While this vote was based on how the DNC conducted its officers' elections, which I had nothing to do with, it is also impossible to ignore the broader context of my work to reform the party, which loomed large over this role." And to be fair, I think that it's plausible that his recent activity has weighed a little bit, at least a little bit, on this decision, and if it hasn't up until this point, if Free in particular isn't motivated by that, and she genuinely feels like they didn't conduct the election in an appropriate way, then other DNC members will get to kind of stick the knife into David Hogg if they don't like what he's doing and they don't really care about that. So either way, it's a win-win for everybody at the DNC who felt uncomfortable having to come to terms with the fact that they lost a lot of people because they're just out of touch. Now, with that being said, there's also Malcolm Kenyatta, and the vote to redo David Hogg's election would also directly impact Malcolm Kenyatta. Now, Malcolm Kenyatta has some different thoughts about this. He actually doesn't think this has anything to do with David Hogg, and he is mad that all of the media is like focusing on David Hogg and taking his word for it. And he posted this video to Twitter, and I'll just play it for you, and then I'll tell you my thoughts about this.
So long story short, 100 days ago today, ironically, I was elected as one of the vice chairs of the Democratic Party. You needed 201.5 votes to be elected. I got 289 votes. David Hogg, who is another vice chair, got 214 votes, I think it was. 214.5 votes. And every article that has been written so far about what's going on has completely incorrectly, with David's support, made this story about the Democratic Party getting David. He even sent out an op-ed saying, this is the first step of the Democratic Party pushing me out. That rubs me the wrong way. Not just because I got way more votes than him, and I also am finding myself in this position of having to go through another election, which was hard and grueling on my team and on my family. But I want people to understand, I have been to 8 states in 100 days. I've traveled almost 20,000 miles. I've done call time. I've attended fundraisers. I've done the hard and unglamorous work of trying to build this party and rebuild this party in a moment where we really need to fucking change what we're doing in the way that we're approaching voters. And yet, we have spent now weeks talking about one person, not about what the party needs to do, but talking about one person. And now, as this new thing has happened, the press is rushing to take David's word for it, that this is yet another way that people are trying to get him. David knows that's bullshit. This challenge was submitted weeks before David ever announced what he was doing with Leaders We Deserve, weeks before. And I refuse to sit here and allow the press to continue to push this narrative as if I'm not sitting right here and as if I didn't get way more votes than he got.
So on one hand, he doesn't think that this has anything to do at all with David Hogg. You know, this was planned before he announced his decision to primary incumbent Democrats. Having said that, though, I think you'd be naive to think that this has nothing to do with that, right? Even if it wasn't the motivation behind this. And if that's the case, I think that Malcolm Kenyatta has a right to be pissed off because he's not the one who is trying to primary incumbent Democrats, which he should, but he's not. So if, he gets fucked over because of David Hogg's actions, I can understand from a personal standpoint why he would be frustrated. That being said, Malcolm Kenyatta is not a trustworthy person. This is somebody who got more votes than David Hogg and who is in a position within the DNC because he doesn't challenge power. In fact, he has done everything in his power to protect the Democratic Party status quo. As Lindsey Blunt points out, he's gone to bat for Hillary Clinton. He's gone to bat for Joe Biden. So this is somebody who vehemently disagrees with David Hogg and his position here. So since he's ideologically opposed to David Hogg, I think that he isn't necessarily worried about a redo per se, because I think he would obviously get elected again. But David Hogg, assuming he's up for election again, don't think he's going to be so lucky. Now, I don't necessarily believe that David Hogg is the threat to the establishment that they think he is. David Hogg doesn't really have specific criteria for who he wants to primary. And it doesn't really make sense when I hear him talk about this, because on one hand, he says things that I agree with, like, hey, we should be focused on policies and working class issues. But then when you ask him, well, what's an ideal Democrat in your opinion? Typically, he talks about the ones that fight Donald Trump, which I agree with, but then he cites individuals like Nancy Pelosi and Hakeem Jeffries. But then he'll also cite AOC oftentimes, and Maxwell Frost, individuals who do fight Donald Trump. So his plan doesn't seem based in ideology, and even if the media is largely trying to lump him in with the progressive insurgency within the Democratic Party, I don't necessarily know that that's the case. Not because he's duplicitous, but because I think that he just doesn't really know what he wants. And when he was on Bill Maher, his analysis of what needs to change was so superficial that, like, it's weird the DNC wants him out, because this is somebody who can give them plausibility that they're adapting and they're changing, because they have somebody like David Hogg, and see, they're listening, when in actuality he's not going to facilitate real change. If he thinks Hakeem Jeffries is A-OK, shit's not going to change, needless to say. So why not just leave him there? Don't fuck with him. Just let him do his thing, and it'll give people the perception that they're genuinely interested in change. But no, they don't even want to tolerate the perception that somebody might challenge them. And just listen to what he said on Bill Maher.
But whenever I see someone your age talking politics, it's usually a Republican guy. I mean, that seems to be where all the energy and and we know that the Democrats do have a problem with men.
Yes.
What are you going to do about that?
Well, I think, one, it's for us to acknowledge the fact that a lot of younger men, I think, agree with what Democrats are saying in terms of making sure that we're getting things cheaper, that nobody wants to pay incredibly high costs for their medical bills or their cost of care, right? Nobody wants to see, in my opinion, nobody wants to see members of Congress that are doing insider trading either. At least I certainly don't. And that goes for both Democrats and Republicans. And right now, what I think happened last election is younger men, they would rather vote for somebody who, even if they don't completely agree with, they don't feel judged by, than somebody who they do agree with, that they feel like they have to walk on eggshells around constantly because they're going to be judged or ostracized or excommunicated. And what's interesting about this moment is it feels like the two parties in some senses have flipped, where, Republicans used to be the judgmental assholes in many ways. And since many Democrats, despite us, I would say for most of us coming from the right place of wanting to do the right thing, we've created a culture where we say, well, if you say the wrong thing, you're excommunicated. And that's just not how human beings work. Nobody is perfect, but ultimately what we have to do here is figure out how to bring people back in and work towards the bigger goal of advancing the future of this country and helping young people especially get by so that they're able to focus on their lives and, getting with a young woman or something like that, instead of how are they going to pay their rent, for example, or how are they working their two jobs. Young people should be able to focus on what young people should be focused on, which is how to get laid and how to go and have fun.
David Hogg for president, ladies and gentlemen.
See, this to me is, how do I want to describe this without sounding like a dick? It's shallow. It's very, very shallow. It's really, quite frankly, a banal analysis of what's happening in the Democratic Party. Listen, this phenomenon of young men moving towards conservatism, it's not unique to the United States. It's happening across the world. There are socioeconomic factors. There are a plethora of things that is impacting this. But to insinuate that Republicans are now the welcoming party, that is a little bit tone deaf, considering, they're not going to be so welcoming if you're a trans person or an immigrant. And I get that he would say, oh, you're proving the point, Mike. You're saying you're being, you're just scolding me for saying something. But I mean, like, you're an adult. We can have these disagreements without you, curling up into a fucking ball and crying about how you were just scolded for your imperfections. I think that debate is essential in politics. So I feel like, you you worrying about whether or not you'll be perceived as being intolerant or saying the wrong thing is such a superficial first world problem that I almost don't even want to hear the rest of what you have to say, because if you are willing to say that, either you're disingenuous or you're pandering to the young men that the Democratic Party lost, and you think that coddling them is going to be what wins them back, when, that might work for some, but others that might need a fucking kick in the ass to say, hey, stop fucking pretending like you're a victim. You're not being oppressed. We're all being fucked over by the oligarchs. Sure, you need to tweak your message if you're a party to appeal to people that lost, but that's not the way to do it. So, I guess I say all this to say that David Hogg is not a threat at all to the Democratic Party establishment. And to the extent that he raises money against incumbents, he is, I believe, wanting to raise a total of $20 million. And he hasn't even said who he plans to target yet. Now, if he were to direct all that money towards like one individual, would that be pretty impactful? Yeah, I think it would. But like, if these threats worry you, if you think that you're inadequate, then ask yourself why that is the case. And I think that Democrats do need to be asking themselves these questions because, listen, look at any other system, any other country. When a party loses in a way like the Democrats just lost, there is a change in leadership. There's a change in membership. Okay, leaders step down. People retire. New people come in. The fact that we're still dealing with not only the same people, but the same strategists who fed Democrats the same bad advice that got them to this predicament in the first place shows you that this party, like, they don't even want to pretend that they're willing to change and adapt to the times. So the whole situation is frustrating, but at the same time, I mean, it's just entertaining to me because I feel like this is low stakes. It's not going to change anything. The vice chair position, for those who don't know, is literally an unpaid position. So you have people like David Hogg and Malcolm Kenyatta working for free and somebody trying to undo those elections because they weren't able to work for free. I mean, sure, this sets you up to be kind of a bigger player in Democratic Party politics down the line. But I mean, to the extent that they can really affect change in this unpaid position within the DNC, one of the most corrupt fucking organizations in the country, is laughable. So in the end, the takeaway is just that, well, this is what happens when you challenge the Democratic Party. Again, I get it. The caveat is that this isn't why they're ousting him, but like it just shows you they will tolerate no pushback whatsoever. And it is laughable to me that they don't even give a fuck about the optics. If you challenge them, you are gone. It's just, that's the DNC, folks. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. This is what we've been dealing with for a very long time. They are absolutely unapologetic in their corruption and desire to protect the status quo, and that's not going to change anytime soon. I wish I could talk to David Hogg and like give him some advice about if he really wanted to change the status quo, specifically what to look out for, who to target, because I feel like his heart is in the right place, but he's just lost and overwhelmed. And, people are egging him on because individuals like Bill Maher agree with him. So he thinks, oh, I'm on the right track. But you're not technically on the right track. You're close. You're very, very close. Primarying incumbents is a good idea, but it's not going to amount to anything if you don't actually choose your targets wisely and if you choose to protect incumbents that are part of the fucking problem. So the whole situation is it's frustrating, but it is still entertaining because, again, I have no horse in this race. Whatever the Democratic Party National Convention does is not going to amount to any change whatsoever for the party. So, it's mere entertainment. But, I mean, goddamn, the extent to which this organization is shameless can never be overstated. Holy shit.